This is an excerpt from the first book in the Dwellers Beneath the Arches series. It was inspired by an incident that happened many years ago. But although she blamed the horse for her fall, Kitty knew it was not Tinker's fault. As she stood there, she sensed them, the whispering ghosts clamouring and calling for her attention. Tinker took a step back, and to pacify her, Kitty held on to her reins, scared the horse would run off. She gave her a quick, reassuring pat as she led her down the path, deciding to walk rather than force Tinker. Something had happened here. Billy Bragg had been trying to hurt someone, and it had got out of control. It was obviously the little person he had been chasing who disappeared, the one Jonathan and his friends were searching for. She remembered the violence in Billy's reaction as his quarry got away. It was a murderous rage. It had happened here, but she could not imagine where the little person could have disappeared to in the chase. The shrubs and trees had not changed much in 7 years. They had been damaged in the fire, but the great oaks still stood. Then Kitty had an idea. She turned to the tense horse. She quietened Tinker, who was getting agitated again, and walked her to the end of the path. Once the horse became amenable, she mounted her, riding her all the way back to the other end of the common. This meant having to lead her back along the road, but Kitty was prepared to take the risk. She decided to return home as quickly as she could. The information gleaned from her morning ride was time-sensitive, and lives depended on it. For those people who don't know London, I used to ride in a part of London called Wimbledon Common in the summer. It was green, very vast, lots of wildlife, insects. It was a very beautiful part of the city, very secluded, and it was part of Wimbledon Village and also very close to Wimbledon, where the annual tennis tournament is held every year. It was very different to North London, where we lived at the time, and it also had the stables where you could rent horses and go out on group rides. I used to ride a big black horse called Inkerman. Inkerman was lovely, very gentle, a very large horse, about 17 hands, but also with all the strength and all the brute might, he was just the most comfortable and easygoing horse you'd ever ride. So with a few others, we'd go for a leisurely ride in Wimbledon Common. We called it group hacks. However, one day, our usual route was blocked by a fallen tree. It completely blocked the entire path and there was no way around it. But the lead riders in the group knew other paths around the common, and it was just easy enough to change course, rather than getting the horses to jump the tree. Now, some of us, especially myself, were not experienced with jumping. So we started moving and eventually found another path we could go through. However, as we tried to lead the horses down the path, this path in particular went to the right and disappeared around the corner. At the end of that corner was a water trough, which is what is mentioned in the books. However, as we steered the horses to follow the path round to the right, the horses became very agitated. Some of them bucked, some of them stopped, and some of them tried to turn around forcefully. It was a real fight to keep the horses straight and to try and move them forward. We never received so much resistance, especially from a horse like Inkerman, who was very steady and bomb-proof. It was a very unusual reaction from him. The more experienced riders of the group tried to lead the way forward and push their horses forward, but the horses weren't having any of it. They were spooked by something, but we weren't sure what. The lead riders eventually dismounted and went to have a look whilst we held on to their horses. They looked around for anything that was upsetting the horses or could be upsetting to them, but there was nothing around. It was just leaves and trees as normal, with a water trough at the end of it, and that was it. No animal waiting, horses are prey animals, but there was nothing that should have spooked them to that extent. They also tried to lead the horses by their reins on the ground, but the horses refused, and the more they tried, the more the horses refused. Eventually, the feeling in the group changed because we realised something was very wrong, but we couldn't quite figure out what. These were paths that were usually ridden through on a daily or weekly basis. However, in the last few days, a lot of the horses, we realised, had resisted going down that path, and no one had been able to force them. You can't exactly force a horse to do what you want them to do. It doesn't work that way. I'm particularly superstitious, and I'm from a very superstitious part of Africa, West Africa. We believe in a lot of what you can't see. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. And I've always followed any signs from animals, especially horses and dogs. They are particularly sensitive. I've always followed any signs that something was wrong or something was amiss, and I've always changed course or changed my route. So naturally, with the superstitious amongst us, we became more and more nervous at the idea of trying to force animals that didn't want to go down a path to go down it. We just weren't comfortable with it anymore, and the horses in their own way had unnerved us all. Perhaps in my mind, something was there, but we couldn't see it. It wasn't necessarily a curse or anything of that nature, but something was definitely present, and the horses just weren't happy. So naturally, the incident had us all spooked, and we all turned around and we found an alternative route to go through. Although it was much longer and a lot closer to the road, the horses just plodded along happily as though nothing was the matter. At that time, Kitty Heathridge in the Dweller series hadn't been written. She wasn't even part of the story, which was very interesting. And then on the drive home, after we'd taken the horses back, and I had the most diabolical idea. Why not write in another character inspired by the Wimbledon incident? And interestingly, inviting this character in changed the course of the books, because it meant that although the books were set in North London, in the Regent's Park area, Wimbledon Common in the southwest of the city had been incorporated into it, and there was a whole new plot twist to the books. The character of Catherine Kitty Heathridge was born. She became one of the most diabolical characters in the series. My advice to you is to never be afraid to add a character to a book or a series. It could make all the difference. Thank you for watching.